So the results are in, and Labour have won emphatically at the 2024 general election. Now, this wasn't unexpected. The polls all indicated this. But to see Labour on 412 seats and to see the Conservative Party slip down to just over 120 is nevertheless a remarkable result. We've also seen some other interesting results in terms of seats. The SNP shedding lots of seats to Labour in Scotland, absolutely on the worst end or beyond their worst expectations. The Liberal Democrats on a record-breaking number of seats for them. Claudia will talk about that in a moment. But also reform, another big story of the night, with a vote share that actually eclipsed that of the Liberal Democrats, despite the fact they only have a handful of seats. Still, Nigel Farage gets to Parliament for the first time, and he will obviously be a big player on the national stage. So that's the seats. What about the vote shares? Now, the vote shares tell a very different story. Labour's result this time only marginally better than its result in 2019 in terms of vote share. Just under 35%, I think just under 2% increase on its vote share. But because of the precipitous fall of the Conservative vote share, down by 20 points near enough, that's opened the door for Labour. And they have taken advantage of that. Now, where did all of these Conservative votes go? Well, we know mostly they went to reform, and some of them would have bled across to the Liberal Democrats in certain parts of the country as well. So there is that story that the Labour vote share is absolutely flattered by the number of seats they ended up with in Parliament. The other thing to say is this was a low turnout election, barely 60% turnout. That's not a hugely enthusiastic endorsement. So Labour's emphatic win, and it is an emphatic win, comes on the back of a relatively low vote share in a relatively low turnout election. Now, I don't want to talk about the next election already, but you can also see how the electorate is somewhat volatile, not very loyal, and we'll probably expect to see results from Labour rather quickly, or the electorate's votes could easily go elsewhere. So Keir Starmer is in power and he's forming his government now. Most of the appointments won't come as a surprise because they were the same people that were in the shadow roles before. But I think what has been striking is just how quickly the government's been out of the gates. They're taking advantage of the fact that eyes are on them and they've got this fresh mandate. Keir Starmer was straight across to Scotland and to Wales and Northern Ireland. Very interesting to see him emphasising the union. Clearly thought that was a weak spot for the Conservative Party before. We have had David Lammy meeting key European leaders and talking about Ukraine. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, meeting the Ukrainians and Zelensky, again, very quickly stamping this idea that this is the new government in town, but that there is continuity with policy before as well. But all eyes will really be on the big decisions that have to be made with the public finances, with a budget, probably sometime in the autumn. Now, let's hear from Sonia who will be analysing the Conservative result, and Claudia Mulholland, who will be talking about the Liberal Democrats.
So the general election has happened now, and the big question remains, what does this mean for the Conservative Party and where does it go next? I think firstly, there's a lot of soul searching to be done about why the Conservatives lost by as much as they did. To lose 251 MPs, including a former Prime Minister, is fairly devastating. And there are already sort of questions about whether it's due to a lack of identity or alignment with the left or the right. This won't really be known until there's a bit of research done into why. But I think there are other issues this election exposed. One, the fact that there were so few people on the ground supporting the Conservative Party. And it was very clear their voter base is still much older. So how can the party put itself in a position to be fit for the future to fight another election? I think that will be one thing they'll have to look at. Two is the threat of smaller parties. So we know that reform potentially prevented them from winning 201 seats, so that's 79 seats. And in seats like Chelsea and Fulham, which you would naturally associate as Conservative seats, the feeling was that reform put a significant dent into the Conservative vote, meaning that Greg Hans lost. So that's now a Chelsea seat. And I think three is the challenge to the electoral system. We found that actually there's not a huge amount of party loyalty, and all of the people that perhaps would have turned a certain age or perhaps come into some money who'd have voted Conservative don't exist in the same way. And there are much younger people who are interested in the policies by the Green Party or policies by Reform. So I think the Conservative Party will need to think about what its voter base looks like, as well as its identity, and how it can prepare itself to be a party fit for the future.
So the Liberal Democrats had a really fantastic election night and surpassed all the predictions in the polls to return a total of 72 seats. That's their best performance in more than a century. And worth noting that those seats span the length and breadth of the country. So right down from St Ives and Cornwall, all the way up that blue wall, the southwest of England, into the southwest of London, and up further north. So looking at places like North Shropshire, Harrogate and Knaresborough, and of course, north of the border in Scotland. Those 72 seats do make the Liberal Democrats now the third largest party, so surpassing the position of the SNP in the previous parliamentary session. And as we've discussed in this series previously, that brings with it some official benefits for the party. What I think it's worth touching on now, though, is what that kind of size and numerical weight of those 72 MPs means for the Liberal Democrats in terms of the legislative process. Their number and extent now means that they will have kind of a far greater influence over the passage of legislation that I think we could have perhaps possibly anticipated prior to the election. The question now for the Liberal Democrats is what they want to use that size and influence to really focus on in the next parliamentary session, and how they want to use that to secure a legacy going forwards. I think the immediate priority for the party will be to deliver on those commitments that they kind of set out and prioritised during the election campaign. So that's thinking about things like the cleanliness of our waterways, health and social care. But there's a real question, I think, about how the party will approach its position on electoral reform and proportional representation. Proportional representation had, of course, historically been a fundamental principle of the Liberal Democrats, and a policy position that had previously been a bit of a red line. I think now the position might have changed ever so slightly, and having returned such a fantastic set of results under the first past the post electoral system, and actually without having increased their vote share on 2019, the party will have to come to terms with the extent to which they want to push electoral reform, or the extent to which they want to dial back that kind of area of their rhetoric and think about prioritising other policy areas.
So thanks for watching. We will be doing lots of analysis over the next few weeks. And of course, please stay tuned for our future Cicero Unplugged videos, where we'll cover a lot of the ground that we weren't able to cover today. Thank you.